There are 48 hours left until my proposal, but then she did this. I always thought proposals were supposed to feel like the calm before a sunrise, soft, warm, full of promise, but mine felt more like standing on a cliff with a blindfold on and blindly trusting the wind to hold me up anyway. Maybe that should have been my first warning sign, but hindsight loves dramatic entrances, doesn't it? For months I planned everything with the kind of precision usually reserved for NASA launches. I picked the restaurant she always whispered about when we walked past it, the one with the string lights and the piano that somehow always played the right song. I rehearsed the speech in my car at red lights, ignoring the confused looks from drivers around me. And I even practiced opening the ring box gracefully, without dropping it, which turned out to be harder than you'd think. But I was ready. I was steady, or at least steady enough. 2 days before the big moment, I was buzzing with that mix of nerves and excitement that makes you pace around your own house pretending you're looking for something important, but actually you're just looking for a reason to breathe slower. Everything felt perfect, which is usually when life likes to poke you with a stick just to see what happens. The news came casually, too casually really. Her friend called me asking if I could help her figure out what to do, because apparently she was worried about my girlfriend. But the moment she hesitated, the moment she said the phrase, "There is something you should probably know," my heartbeat actually paused like it needed a second to emotionally prepare itself. People always talk about heartbreak, but they never mention how quiet the world gets right before it happens, like the universe takes a deep breath for you. She cheated last week at her friend's birthday party, and I remember standing there, phone in hand, staring at the wall like it had just insulted me personally. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, that's not my style. Anyway, instead something switched inside me, a kind of calm clarity that shows up when you finally realize the person you trusted the most wasn't holding the same map you were following all along. I thanked her friend politely, because manners matter even in emotional earthquakes. Then I sat down and thought things through step by step. No raging, no dramatic storm, just logic, sharp, clean, steady. If she had crossed a line, I wasn't going to let her rewrite the narrative to make herself the victim in someone else's story, especially not mine. That's when I made my decision. Before talking to her, I would talk to the people who mattered most, because if there was one thing I refused to let happen, it was her twisting the truth into something convenient. The funny thing about heartbreak is everyone expects chaos, yelling, broken plates, dramatic exits. I chose a different route. I chose spreadsheets in my head, columns of facts, people, and possible reactions. Logic became my emotional first aid kit, and honestly, it worked better than ice cream. First, I called her sister, because if anyone deserved to hear the truth early, it was the person who used to joke about me becoming her brother-in-law. She answered, all cheerful, asking how the proposal planning was going. And for a second, I just stared at the ring box on my desk, thinking, wow, this conversation has range. I took a slow breath and told her calmly what I had heard when I had heard it, and from whom no accusations, just facts laid out like cards on a table. Silence on the other end, then a soft, confused, "No way, are you serious?" followed by the sound of her pacing. I could practically hear the gears turning. She asked questions, the right ones. When, where, who else knows, I answered each one, clearly no dramatics. I even repeated that I was not asking her to take sides, just to know the truth before the story got edited into something more convenient for the main actress. Then I called her two closest friends, not the lightweight party crowd, the real ones, the ones who sat with us in sweatpants and talked about life and bills and weird neighbors, and I did the same thing, presented the facts calmly. I told them I planned to cancel the proposal, that I was not going to embarrass myself pretending everything was fine when it very clearly was not. I said it in a steady voice, but my hand still tightened around the phone like it needed emotional support. The pattern repeated: shock, disbelief, then slow, heavy acceptance, and a kind of quiet anger that wasn't aimed at me. For once they asked if I was sure, so I told them about the messages I had seen after her friend called, the half-deleted chat history, the conveniently vague posts, the timelines. That didn't add up. Math does not lie, even when people are trying their best to. By the time I spoke with her parents, I was practically running a press conference in my own life. I kept the same approach: calm, respectful, direct. I told them I loved their daughter, but I respected myself too, and those two things were now in conflict. Her mom went quiet in that way moms do when the world rearranges itself in front of them. Her dad sighed long and tired, like a balloon deflating slowly. They did not defend what she did. They just kept saying we had no idea, and I believed them. Word travels fast in families, especially when disappointment is involved. It didn't take long before the group chats stopped lighting up with her name. The playful memes faded, the invitations quieted. She started noticing people pulling back, being short over texts, suddenly too busy to meet up. That's when she decided to do damage control. She called me, sounding offended and wounded all at once, asking why everyone was acting weird and what exactly had I been telling people. Her voice had that innocence mode activated, like she was auditioning to play misunderstood heroine of the year. She insisted nothing happened at that birthday party, that people were exaggerating, that someone probably misinterpreted something harmless. I listened quietly, letting her talk, letting her build the version of reality she preferred, because sometimes the best way to see the truth is to stop filling in the blanks for other people and just let them talk until their own words trap them. When she finally asked, "Well, do you even believe me?" I looked at the ring box, closed my eyes for a second, and realized my answer would decide everything that came next. I told her I would answer her question, but only after she finished explaining her version. Without interruptions, people reveal a lot when they think they're controlling the narrative. She went on about how it was just a normal birthday party, how everyone was drinking, how someone probably misread a friendly moment, and how she could not believe I would even entertain such an idea about her. She layered her words carefully, like she was frosting a cake, hoping no one would notice it was collapsing underneath. When she finally stopped talking, there was this strange moment of stillness, like the universe was leaning and waiting to hear my next move. I kept my voice calm, steady, almost too steady, and said, "I believe the facts, not the fiction people build around them, and right now the facts are not on your side." She paused long enough that I knew the truth hit her, even if she refused to admit it. She switched to frustration, asking why I would go around telling people something so damaging before coming to her directly. I reminded her that the damaging part was the action, not the reporting of it. And besides, I already knew she would choose denial. It was her specialty. She didn't like that answer. Her voice sharpened. She tried to push blame in every direction except the one that mattered, accusing friends of spreading rumors, insisting someone was jealous, or trying to sabotage our relationship. I let her run through the entire list of imaginary villains until she finally circled back to me, asking what exactly I planned to do now. I looked at the ring box again. Funny how something that once felt like a beginning could suddenly become nothing more than a paperweight with emotional backstory. I told her the proposal was off. I said it gently, but with a clarity she couldn't dodge. I told her trust wasn't something I replaced like batteries, and once broken, it didn't magically reset just because the person responsible didn't like the consequences. She tried to sound shocked, offended, heartbroken, all at once, a whole theatrical performance. But beneath it, I heard panic, not because she loved me, but because the story she wanted to present to the world was slipping out of her hands. She asked if we could at least talk in person, as if proximity could rewrite timelines. I told her we could meet, but only so I could return a few things she had left at my place, nothing more. She went quiet again, not the soft silence from before, but the heavy kind, the kind that says someone is realizing their usual tricks are hitting walls instead of hearts. Later that day, her sister texted me saying she had confronted her, and my now former almost fiancé had tried to deny everything again, but the timeline didn't survive even basic questioning. Her friends had begun stepping back too, realizing the pieces didn't fit her version. Her parents sent me a polite message saying they understood my decision and respected it. It was strange. Everyone around her saw the truth and reacted accordingly, but she kept clinging to the idea that she could talk her way out of actions that already spoke louder than her excuses. She kept insisting everything was fine as long as she said it confidently enough, but reality doesn't bend that easily. By the time we finally met in person, I already knew this conversation wouldn't be about saving anything. It would be about closure and clarity, two things she had never been great at holding on to. We met at the little cafe near her apartment, the one where we used to split one dessert, pretending we were being responsible adults, even though both of us secretly wanted our own plate. This time, the place felt smaller, tighter, like the walls were listening and waiting to see which one of us would break first. She walked in with that composed look she practiced in mirrors, calm, confident, unbothered, the kind of expression people wear when they hope no one notices the cracks beneath it. She sat down across from me, smoothed her hair, and said, "We need to clear this up," like she was about to negotiate a parking ticket instead of a relationship disaster. I didn't waste time. I set the small bag with her things on the table: keys, charger, hoodie, the usual evidence that someone used to fit into your life. I pushed it toward her gently. She looked at it like it was some kind of insult, a symbol she wasn't ready to accept. She started talking fast, insisting what happened at that party was exaggerated, that people misunderstood, that maybe someone was trying to ruin things between us. She said the word maybe a lot, which is usually code for "I hope you don't ask for specifics." I listened quietly, which annoyed her, because she kept expecting emotional fireworks, and I kept giving her calm weather with light winds. When she realized excuses weren't landing, she switched strategies. She said she loved me. She said she never wanted to lose me. She said the whole situation was unfair, but the whole time she avoided the one thing that mattered. She never actually said she didn't do it. People forget how loud omissions can be. I leaned forward just a little and told her I wasn't here to argue or investigate. I already had all the clarity I needed. I told her trust isn't a puzzle I'm willing to reassemble every time someone decides honesty is optional. She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand gently, not to silence her, but to keep the conversation from spiraling into another emotional maze with no exit. I said, "Look, I'm not angry, I'm disappointed, but mostly I'm grateful, because the truth showed up before I made a lifelong commitment. that would have glued me to a story that wasn't real. She blinked, slowly processing that gratitude was not the angle she expected. She tried one last attempt, asking why I told her family and friends first, trying to paint it as betrayal on my part. One reminded her calmly that they deserved honesty before the fiction version reached them. I told her protecting her comfort had never been my responsibility, especially not at the cost of my own clarity. Her expression shifted from defensive to stunned, as if she was finally realizing the situation wasn't a debate she could win with emotion or charm. It was simply consequences catching up with choices. She looked at the ring box when I placed it on the table, unopened, untouched, no speech attached to it anymore. She reached toward it slowly, not to accept it, but to see if it was still real, if the future she assumed was guaranteed had actually been that close. I told her gently that some stories end before the proposal, and that's okay. It just means someone up there cares about my long-term peace of mind. Her eyes stayed on the ring box, not crying, not apologizing, just frozen in that uncomfortable space between denial and reality. And in that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't heartbreak, this was clarity dressed as disappointment, and honestly, it looked good on me. After our meeting, I walked out of the cafe lighter than I expected, not joyful exactly, but clear, like someone had wiped fingerprints off the window. I'd been trying to see my future through the air, felt different, sharper, cleaner. Maybe that was just what it felt like to reclaim your own story after someone else tried to rewrite it without permission. I didn't look back at her sitting there with the ring box still on the table. She didn't reach for it. She didn't push it toward me. She just stared at it like it was a plot twist she hadn't rehearsed for, and honestly, it wasn't my job anymore to help her understand the script. When I got home, my phone buzzed nonstop. Her friends, her family, even people who normally stayed out of relationship matters, all sending messages that sounded like the world collectively letting out a sigh. They told me they supported my decision. They told me I handled everything with more maturity than they'd ever seen in a breakup situation. One even said, "You stayed calmer than I stay when my food delivery is 5 minutes late," which I took as a genuine compliment. Meanwhile, she started her own version of the situation, sending messages to people claiming nothing happened at the party, saying I was overreacting or misunderstanding or misled. Except she forgot one detail: people already had the facts, and facts tend to travel faster and cleaner than excuses. Her attempts at rewriting the timeline didn't land because no one was buying tickets to that show anymore. Her sister texted me later saying she tried to pull the family together to defend her, but the problem was no one wanted to participate in a defense built on maybes and what ifs and exaggerated innocence. Her parents didn't return her calls for a while, needing space to figure out what part of their daughter was real and what part was just curated presentation. As for me, I decided to do something unusual, something healing, something completely responsible. I cleaned my apartment, not emotionally cleaned, I mean actual cleaning, vacuum, laundry, dishes, the works. It felt symbolic, like resetting the environment before resetting the mindset. I put the unopened ring box in a drawer, not as a wound, but as a reminder that Dodge disasters deserve their own little retirement space. A few days passed, and the quiet became peaceful instead of heavy. I went back to my routine: work, gym, coffee, the usual, but it felt like I had upgraded versions of all of them, like life had given me a software update without asking. She sent me one more message that week, a long one, saying she missed me, saying she didn't deserve everyone turning their backs, saying I ruined everything by telling people. Before she could explain her side, I read the whole thing carefully, then set my phone down, thinking it was interesting how she still talked about consequences as if they were accidents that just happened to her, not stepping stones she placed herself. I didn't reply, not out of spite, but out of clarity. You do not negotiate with someone who is still editing the truth while asking you to trust the draft. By the end of that week, something unexpected happened, something small but meaningful. I laughed, not a bitter laugh, not a sarcastic one, just a genuine laugh at the simple relief of realizing life had handed me a blessing disguised as bad news. A proposal was supposed to change my life, and it did, just not in the way I planned. A week after the proposal, that wasn't, I started noticing something interesting. My phone stayed quieter, but my mind got louder in the best possible way, the kind of loud where thoughts finally line up instead of crashing into each other like grocery carts on a busy Sunday. Clarity really is underrated. People around me acted like I had survived some epic emotional hurricane, but honestly, it felt more like stepping out of a room that had terrible lighting and suddenly realizing, wow, I can actually see things now. Everything looked more honest without the constant effort of trying to pretend a relationship was solid when it was basically held together with duct tape and hopeful thinking. Then her cousin called me out of nowhere. At first, I thought maybe he wanted to yell or demand explanations, but instead he said thank you, which threw me off balance a bit. He said thanks for handling everything like an adult, because apparently she was telling the family that I had panicked over nothing and invented the whole situation, except her cousin had already spoken to people who were actually at that birthday party, people with functioning memories and no reason to lie. so the more she insisted on her innocence, the worse the whole thing looked. I didn't ask for details, I didn't need play-by-play updates of her unraveling storyline. But knowing the truth was standing on its own legs without me pushing it was oddly comforting, like watching a plant grow after you stop watering it. And realizing nature took over from there, I spent more time focusing on myself, something I clearly should have done earlier. I went for longer runs, cooked meals that didn't come out of a box, and even answered messages I had ignored for months because I was always emotionally managing someone else's chaos. My friends noticed the difference. One of them joked that I looked like a man who just refunded a bad purchase and felt proud about it. Meanwhile, she kept trying to fix her reputation instead of fixing herself. She sent out carefully worded messages, little speeches about misunderstandings and miscommunications, each one sounding like a polished script written for an audience she hoped was still paying attention, except most people had muted the channel. Her sister told me she finally admitted there was a moment at the party, but insisted it didn't mean anything, which is something people say when they can't deny a fact, so they try to downgrade it instead, like a bargain sale on accountability. But it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't keeping score. One afternoon, I opened the drawer with the ring box just to see how I felt about it. Surprisingly, it didn't sting, it didn't ache, it didn't feel like a symbol of failure. It felt like a trophy for dodging a lifelong subscription to emotional confusion. I closed the drawer gently, like placing a book back on the shelf after finishing the best chapter in it. The funny part is people expected me to be bitter or broken, but I felt the opposite. I felt restored, like I had returned to factory settings with better upgrades installed. I wasn't avoiding love, I wasn't swearing off relationships, I was simply walking forward with clearer boundaries and a much stronger nonsense filter. Life had not fallen apart, it had rearranged itself into something that finally made sense. 2 weeks passed, and life settled into a rhythm that actually felt healthy, the kind of rhythm you don't notice when you're living inside constant emotional background noise. I wasn't checking my phone every hour, I wasn't rethinking conversations, or decoding vague tones, or wondering if silence meant something was wrong. Peace is strangely loud when you're not used to it. Then, one morning I woke up to a message from her mom, simple, short, asking if I was doing all right. She apologized again for everything and said she hoped I knew the family held no resentment toward me, and honestly, that meant more than I expected. I told her I was doing well, genuinely well, and she said she was glad because her daughter was still insisting everyone misunderstood her, but no one was buying the discounted version of the truth anymore. People were pulling away from her not because of one mistake, but because she kept trying to cover the hole with glitter, pretending no one would notice the ground still caving in underneath. And the more she insisted nothing happened, the more obvious it became that something definitely did. Meanwhile, I focused on building my life like a renovation project, fixing corners I had ignored, replacing habits that didn't serve me. I even restarted an old hobby, playing guitar, though the guitar sounded like it needed therapy after years of neglect. Still, progress is progress. My friends dragged me out more, to dinners, hikes, game nights. They said it was nice to have the real me back, the one who laughed easily, the one who didn't look like he was carrying invisible responsibility for someone else's emotional weather system. I realized they were right. I had been so busy balancing a relationship that wasn't balanced at all that I forgot what calm felt like. And then the part one expected finally happened. She reached out again, this time with a voice message. Her tone was different, not defensive, not angry, but tired, like she had finally run out of excuses. She said she hated how everyone acted like she was the villain. She said she didn't deserve to lose everyone over one stupid moment. She kept avoiding the word mistake. She hovered around it like it was too heavy to lift. She said she wanted closure, she wanted to talk, she wanted a chance to explain things fully, since texts apparently didn't capture the truth. I listened to the message twice, not because I needed clarity, but because I wanted to be absolutely sure I wasn't hearing anything that resembled responsibility, and I wasn't. I replied politely, saying I wished her the best, but I didn't see any benefit in reopening conversations that would only circle around the same empty points. She sent a sad emoji, which I guess was her version of reflection. Later that evening, her cousin sent me a screenshot. Someone from that birthday party had finally spoken up publicly in the group chat, stating exactly what happened. Nothing graphic, nothing dramatic, just clear facts stated plainly. It wasn't explosive, but it was enough to make her entire denial campaign collapse like a house of cards in slow motion. She left the chat shortly after, which honestly said everything her words couldn't. As for me, I felt nothing harsh, not satisfaction, not anger, just a quiet confirmation that the path I chose had been the right one all along. Sometimes life doesn't need revenge or dramatic closure. Sometimes truth does the heavy lifting for you while you focus on becoming a stronger version of yourself. The news from that group chat spread faster than anything she had tried to control these past couple of weeks. The truth finally stepped out on stage without hesitation, and everyone saw it clearly. No embellishments, no dramatic sound effects, just simple honesty. and that alone was enough to shift the entire atmosphere around her. I didn't celebrate, I didn't screenshot it for later, I just sat there in the quiet of my living room letting that confirmation settle like a final puzzle piece, snapping into place not because I needed to win, but because clarity always deserves a moment of acknowledgement. She didn't message me after leaving the group chat, but a few people did. One of her friends apologized for doubting me earlier, saying she wanted to believe the best in her. But truth doesn't leave much room for customization. Her cousin said things were tense in the family, that everyone was giving her space, hoping she would finally accept reality, but acceptance wasn't her strongest skill. Meanwhile, my life kept moving in a cleaner, straighter line. I focused more on my work, and even my boss noticed, commenting that I seemed sharper lately, like someone had finally taken heavy weights off my shoulders. I didn't explain that the weight had been emotional, not physical, but he wasn't wrong. I was lighter in ways that didn't require a gym membership. I started planning small things that didn't involve navigating someone else's unpredictability. Weekend trips, new hobbies, reconnecting with people I had unintentionally drifted away from. My days felt steady, my nights felt calm, and the ring box stayed closed in the drawer like a retired relic from another timeline. One afternoon, while grabbing groceries, I ran into one of our mutual acquaintances. She hesitated before approaching, probably unsure how awkward it might be, but I smiled first, making it easy. She told me she admired how I handled everything with dignity and calm, and I realized those qualities weren't something I consciously performed, they were simply who I became after choosing clarity over chaos. Later that evening, I got a message from her sister, short, straightforward. She said her sister was struggling not because she regretted the moment at the party, but because she regretted losing control of the story, and that right there said everything. Truth wasn't her enemy, exposure was. I thanked her sister for the update, but told her I genuinely wished her sibling growth. Because life has a way of repeating lessons until someone finally learns them, and I hoped she would eventually choose the hard path of honesty instead of the easy path of denial. As for me, I spent that night sitting on my balcony, letting the cool air wash over me, thinking about how close I came to proposing to someone who treated truth like a suggestion instead of a foundation. The thought didn't hurt, it didn't sting, it just reminded me that timing can be a strange kind of blessing disguised as heartbreak. This wasn't the life path I planned, but it was one that made sense, one that left room for someone who actually valued trust, reflection, and honesty as much as I did. A month later, the entire situation felt like something I had walked through, not something that still clung to me the way old emotions sometimes do. I could talk about it calmly, the same way you talk about a storm after the sun comes out, aware it happened, aware it mattered, but not controlled by it anymore. People stopped bringing her up unless they were commenting on how well I handled everything, and even then I kept the conversations brief because the truth didn't need repetition. It had already done its job, and I had already moved forward. One evening, I sat down with a coffee at the same cafe where everything officially ended, but this time it felt different, brighter, calmer, not connected to sadness or endings, but to a quieter sense of victory. I didn't win against her, I won back myself, and honestly, that was the better prize. While I was there, her cousin walked in. He spotted me, walked over, and smiled, saying, "You know, you probably saved yourself 20 years of confusion with 1 month of clarity." I laughed, because he wasn't wrong. We talked briefly, and he told me she was finally starting to admit parts of what happened, not the full truth, but pieces of it, which for her was basically a personality transformation. He said she wasn't doing great socially. People had stepped back, not out of cruelty, but out of exhaustion, because even the most patient people eventually stop participating in stories that keep contradicting themselves. I wished her well, genuinely, but from a very safe emotional distance. Growth is her journey, now not my assignment. Walking home that night, I realized something important. Heartbreak doesn't define anyone. What defines you is how you rise after the truth rearranges your life. I didn't crumble, I didn't lose myself, I didn't turn bitter. I learned, I adapted, I sharpened my boundaries, and strengthened my sense of self. And the proposal that never happened stopped feeling like a loss. It became a narrow escape, a redirection, a quiet favor from the universe, a reminder that love isn't proven by how tightly you hold on to someone, it's proven by how clearly you see yourself when things fall apart. Months later, I picked up the ring box from the drawer, not to reopen anything, but to close the chapter completely. I sold the ring and used part of the money to book a small solo trip somewhere, quiet, somewhere peaceful, somewhere I could hear my own thoughts without anyone else's noise, mixed in a celebration not of heartbreak, but of growth, of clarity, of choosing myself with full awareness. As the plane took off, I leaned back, closed my eyes, and felt that weightless moment when the ground drops away and the sky opens up, and I realized that's exactly what my life felt like now, open wide, full of possibility, no false promises, no hidden truths, just an honest, fresh beginning.